Welcome to Saturday morning yin yang yoga. So we're going to start with the yin because the yin is generally done when the tissue in the body is not particularly warm. So we're not trying to we're trying to get to the fascia. So we want the muscle tissue to be a little bit resistant, and as we move, muscle tissue gets warmer, it gets more pliant. So then it's not as resistant, so we don't get quite the same amount of stress on this connective tissue. So that's what we're after for yin, is to put like just the tiniest bit of stress on mostly the fascia, the connective tissue that wraps around muscle, lives underneath the skin. Because when we put a little bit of pressure on that tissue, it helps that tissue hydrate. It actually stimulates the production of hyaluronic acid, which then hydrates the tissue. So our goal essentially is to just move a little more smoothly. That's what we're after. So we're not trying to make our hamstrings longer or any of that kind of stuff that we might normally associate with flexibility. What we're really after is, can I put just enough stress on the tissue to feel it and then hold that stretch for a while so that I then wind up with a kind of mechanism that helps hydrate and make that tissue move a little more smoothly. So it's a gentle practice compared to the way that a lot of notions that people have about it out there. So we're going to start with a butterfly pose. Now you can do this butterfly pose as a forward bend if you like, and generally with yin we get into the shape and then try to find a sensation and then get really relaxed and hold kind of right along the edge of that sensation. And by hold I don't mean remain perfectly still as much as kind of ride the sensation. So if it starts to get a little lighter, you might shift the body a little bit. If something feels a little tender or a little spicy, you can shift the body a different direction to take away some of the spiciness. So we're going to try to get into that sort of place in the center of all that. So not too much, not too little, right in the middle, just right. So the Goldilocks principle applies to our yin practice. So I am going to do a little bit of an elevation, so I get a little bit of a chest opener as well, because that, even though yin really targets the hips and the low back, the places where the tissue is a little more resistant and a little thicker, a little shoulder never hurt anybody, so I'm going to do it that way. So I've got myself organized so that I can do a butterfly with my legs, and then I'm laying over this pillow, so the pillow holds my rib cage and my spine, and my shoulder is allowed to my arm bone is allowed to drop over. So the shoulder blade is on the inside edge of my shoulder blade is on this pillow. But this muscle here in the front, this little pec muscle, and the muscles that support or hold my arm bone to my shoulder blade are all allowed to sort of drop over the edge. So it targets some deeper muscle tissue. You may not be particularly spicy or interesting, but the sensation is not necessarily all that important as much as that when I'm done, there's a sense that things have shifted or changed. So we'll find out. Right now it feels like my shoulder is kind of like my collarbone is rolling slightly down, my shoulder blade is rolling slightly up. So at the end of this, we'll see if I have a different sensation. there's a point where, for me, usually between 3 and 5 minutes, where there's a kind of shift that takes place, where I can feel sort of where there might have been a little bit of tension being held by the nervous system that gently releases. Just a little sense of ease that shows up. And that is often sort of what I'm watching for. If I'm practicing on my own and not necessarily timing myself, I kind of wait for that sensation and then spend a wee bit more time and come out. Take one more big breath. And then I'm going to gently start to shift this pose. So the first thing I'm going to do is just bring my knees together so my feet are resting on the floor. And then take the support out from under that. Then I'm going to take the support out from under my back. And then for just a moment, I'm going to try to experience, like, was there a difference, or did a change occur? So laying on my back here, I can notice, like, did my shoulder shift? And now, instead of the shoulder blade feeling like it's rolling up, shoulder blade feels like it's down, and the collarbone is gently lifting up. So that's a nice sensation for me in my shoulders, since it feels like a shift occurred that is a little more balanced. So I'm a fan of that. There's this kind of slight feeling of an impression left behind in the back, which is really interesting. And I like watching that shift. And then one of my favorite things to do after the butterfly is to kind of drop the knees the opposite direction, get a little internal rotation going. Adduction. Let's kind of feel that shift. It also gives me a little sensation around the outer hip, so I can see if anything is tender there. Like, is one side any tighter than the other? I can pay attention as I go. All right, so we're going to do a twist, and we're going to hold the twist for about 3.5 minutes or so. I might go a little less or a little more. So I've put this pillow under here so that when my leg is resting in this twist, my shoulder is able to stay heavy on the ground. So that's a preference that I have. Now, sometimes I'll use a blanket or whatever I've got handy. So in this case, I'm just using this pillow because it's here. Yoga blocks work really great as well. And so then I can drape my top leg over, get a tiny bit more stretch through the outer hip without causing any trouble for my shoulder joint, because this gives me quite a big stretch in the pec major, this muscle that connects from the breastbone over to the arm bone. And so I can add on to the pose by kind of rolling a little bit more towards my legs, towards my knees, or take away from the pose by rolling a little bit more towards my shoulder. So it gives me a little bit of freedom to, again, kind of ride or surf the edge of sensation. I want just a little bit, both on the outer hip and on the chest. And then as things go along and things get softer and there's a little bit of a release, then I can start to play with it. And really, the thing about yin that I think is really interesting is this kind of subtlety of sensation that we're monitoring. stay for about 30 more seconds, about 5 deep breaths. Take a nice big inhale. And then I'm coming back nice and slow, just coming on back to the center. Oh. Now before I go anywhere, I'm just gonna pause for a second. I do little windshield wipers with the legs, that feels nice. And then I'm gonna kind of slowly pull that arm back out of there. Oh. All right. And then just kind of check in and see, did that create any kind of a shift or a change? Does it feel pleasant or unpleasant, so that I can decide if I'm doing the right thing? If it's unpleasant, generally I try to avoid unpleasantry. So I will change the way I do the pose the next time to a little less. If it feels pleasant, then that generally tells me I'm on the right track. Now, this is the decision I make in this time in my life. In 20 years, I may have other ideas about this, and I'll let you know then. But for now, that feels like the best way to practice. Okay, so I've set myself up on the other side. I like to give at least 30 seconds to a minute or so before I do the second side. So give that, time just to let the body shift, and then to kind of slowly come into the next side. So you don't have to be in a rush if you're practicing on your own. You could just kind of monitor your own situation and come in when you're ready. And then again, I'm not holding myself with tension if I can help it. I'm trying to relax tension out of my body. So I can use the breath to do that. Sometimes a big deep sigh works really nicely. Just, it helps everything kind of melt. And then just monitoring that sense of kind of gripping or holding with the face, the eye, around the eyes or around the mouth, or for me around the shoulders as well. And even sometimes around the abdominals, right? So I might sometimes grip with my abs when I'm pushing my low back around too hard or something like that. Looking for little signs that I'm being too pushy, and some signs in terms of the sensation itself. Like, does any pain develop? And pain is tricky to define, but we can say for sure sharp shooting sensation is pain generally. And usually the body kind of jerks itself out of that kind of a situation. But some more subtle and kind of mysterious aspects might be numbness or tingling, or burning sensation. Those might be indications of damage that don't feel particularly painful for some folks. So just monitoring those sensations as well. If your foot falls asleep or your fingers fall asleep, there's probably a realignment that could be done that would be more skillful. gonna take about 4 more breaths here. Come on back to the center, just pausing for a moment, and again, just slowly kind of unwinding this for anywhere between like 30 seconds and a minute. And then noticing the kind of impact or the outcome of the pose. Outcome is not exactly the right word. Impact might be good, except that feels like it's meant to be a bigger thing. It can be quite subtle, if at all. Okay, so I am in love with this little psoas release core strengthening movement pattern that I've been doing for a few months now. So I'm going to add that in here as well. So starting with the feet in a constructive rest position and the hands behind the head, I'm going to start with my right leg. Lift the toes up and then just glide the foot all the way out to straight with the toes pointing straight up, reaching through the heel and lengthening through the hip flexor, and then bringing the knees straight in and curling up toward it, trying to keep my head nice and stationary, so I'm having to do the work with my abs. So stretching out and then curling in, and then stretching out, and then curling in. And then now as I stretch out, I'm going to turn the leg a little to that external rotation, so the toes point to the outside right, and curl in toward the right elbow. So straight up, stretch out, and then rotate and curl in. Straight up, stretching out, rotating and curling in. And then one more time like that, straight up. Okay, so then the next one comes across, so we're going to do an internal rotation. So stretch the leg, toes pointing up, then rotating inward and coming across the body. And then I do a little twist with the core as well. So straight up, feeling that stretch across the front of the hip, feel the rotation, then bring it in. And again, it's just about subtly shifting, lengthening, opening up the hip flexor. Okay, so then this one I'm just gonna stretch it out and pause just like that. Give it a little internal to external rotation. Because that feels so nice. And then just kind of draw that foot back in and pause. So not every day do I get a really big change from this. Some days I really do. I feel such an interesting sort of shifting that my hip almost feels like the femur bone drops in another inch. And I can put my thumb right there and feel the difference in the tendon. But some days it's more subtle. Like today, the sensation is just of a kind of real pleasant warmth in the hip and the front of the, and my abdominals. It's just really nice. So it's not, this is really subtle work when we're looking at these muscles because they're so deep, like the stabilizers in the shoulder where we put the arms out over the blanket or over the bolster. That's really subtle work. This is subtle work. We're looking at really deep muscle and, you know, so not as much nerve, there's not as many nerves going to those areas to send information back to the brain. So it's not as sensitive, but you know, we're working as best we can. So my toes are up on my left side. And again, I'm going to stretch that leg straight out and then come, I like to linger with the stretch a little bit, and then come straight up the center and then straight out, kind of linger with that stretch a little bit. Come straight up the middle. I'm going to do that one more time. Glide my leg out there. Come straight up. So this is where I'm going to turn to the external rotation, rotate my knee and heel and everything. So straight up right now, feel the stretch across the front of the hip, and then rotate. You can feel that shift inside the body. It's really interesting. So then one more time. And then now I'm going to do straight up, and I'll go to the internal rotation and come across. So first straight up lengthen, and then across. And straight up lengthen. And this one for me is a much more subtle movement in the leg. My external rotation is really intense. You know, it's a lot. I can almost rotate to the point where my foot points exactly sideways. Not quite, but close. With the internal rotation, much more subtle. So just kind of feeling that out. Okay, then I'm going to glide that guy back into place and pause for a moment, just let everything go. So again, there's a kind of moment where everything feels like it just relaxes a little more deeply, and that's the moment I'm kind of waiting for. And so as soon as I hit that, then I'm ready to move on. Or maybe mostly ready to move on. So I'm going to do some little windshield wipers, and then we're going to meet up in an all fours position. So I will meet you there if you want to do more windshield wipers, or you want to add some cat shapes to your all fours position. You can do that. Oh, I'm going to get a little sip of water, and then we'll move forward from there. Okay. So finding this kind of you can move around in whatever way seems kind of nice to you. All right. So we're going to bring one leg forward. I'm going to start with my right leg forward. And then with the right leg forward, I'm going to pause for a moment and find the point where my knee feels like it's right over my hip. And I'm just going to slide my foot just a little bit forward. It's going to be a little wobbly potentially, but I want some room here for this knee, because I'm going to shift my hip forward and then shift it back. Now, what I have discovered is sometimes the kneecap does not love me on this one. So if I bend or pull my shin up off the floor a little bit, tuck the toes under maybe, or maybe sometimes just even pick the toes up off the floor, it seems to help a little bit. But for you, a blanket might be better under the shin, so you can add padding if you need. Okay, so then I'm gonna find, like, where's the point where I go past the edge, going back. And then I wanna find the spot right at the beginning where I just feel sensation in my left hip, and that's where I'm gonna pause for now. So we're kind of doing this bridge the gap point right now. So from yin into the yang or more flowy stuff, we're going to pause for just a moment and kind of do somewhere in between. Not as long as the yin, maybe not quite as flowy as the flow. And then I'm going to send the hip back. Now this gives me a little stretch in my hamstrings. And so you can see, like, if I turn it a little more on the diagonal, then the stretch shifts to the center part of the hamstring. If I turn it a little more out towards the edge, then I get the outer part of the hamstring a little bit more hamstrings. Oh, technically it's 3 muscles. Although one could potentially even be 2 muscles, depending on how you think about it. So maybe it's 4. All right, coming on down. And then again, I just want to notice any kind of subtlety here. Does my low back feel like I treated it well? How does the right hip feel compared to the left? And then when you're ready, we'll do the second side. So again, I want to start with my hip mostly over my knee, and then I'm going to just slide my foot a little forward so that I've got plenty of room. This knee's not going to wind up in any kind of trouble. And again, you can kind of pick the shin up or add the pillow or blanket or whatever you need to under your shin to make your back knee happy. Cool. So I'm going to go back and forth a little bit here. Just feel like there's like almost no sensation whatsoever. And then as I kind of subtly creep forward, like where's the point where I go, that's too much sensation, right? So then I'm going to back off of that and find just right at the beginning. And then that's going to be where I'm holding steady. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 more breaths here. And then I'm going to back the hips up and fold over my front leg. Take a couple more breaths here. And then I'm going to shift my weight just enough that I can get that leg to go back. Oh, give it a little rinse. Okay. Now, you could do a little bit of child's pose or a little bit of downward dog. You'll come to a mountain pose. Whether that's super stiff, you know, like more exaggerated mountain pose, or maybe a little bit more of a loosey, wiggly mountain pose. Sometimes mountains are wiggly. I like to do a little bit of both, so try to find my way in with a little bit of a shimmy. And then try to find the place where my feet feel like they're as evenly balanced, knees a little soft, a little extra work in the core, but rib cage lined up with the rest of the body, so I'm not pushing my chest forward. And then just let the arm bones relax. That's my preference. So find yours. So then kind of memorize the sensation. What does it feel like on the right side? What about the left side? So our flowy movement today is going to just keep on moving. So we're not going to hold any poses for very long. So we're going to lift, fold, come up halfway, fold, step back. Now I'm going to down dog first, and then I'm going to come forward into a plank, and then lower through. So just kind of a sun salutation movement. And then once we get back to down dog, taking that right leg up. Now you can skip the plank and the lowering down bits. So stepping the right leg forward, I'm going to come to warrior 1 first. So I'm just going to kind of wiggle my way in and feel it. And make sure I like the way it landed. So we're going to come up and then flow down. Come up, and this can get a little wobbly, so just be prepared to catch, flow down. And then one more time I'm going to come up, straighten out the front leg, flow down, and I'm going to try to point myself a little more forward and only go as far as I feel like the hamstring is there. Bend the knee and straighten it again. Bend the knee and straighten it again. And then I'm going to take myself into a balancing pose. So this is going to become a standing split. So I'm going to bend the knee and then take myself up into the balance. And I'm right on the edge of a rug, so I'm already feeling slightly out of balance, but that's kind of part of the fun. So seeing if I can take the hands off the floor for a length of time. Don't know how long it's going to be. Half a second, 1 full second, hard to say. Taking one more breath. And then I'm going to bring that leg in, come up halfway, exhale. exhale, fold. That feels so good. And then come all the way to standing. Give it a big stretch. Oh, find the mountain. Big breath. Feeling the difference between the right and left. Coming all the way up. Folding forward. Coming up halfway. Folding. Now I'm going to just step back to down dog and just hold that now for a breath. But you can come into your plank. Lower down. And then back to cobra. And then, or up dog, and then coming back to down dog. Take the left leg up, so you can just play with the practice that way. And then I'm going to step forward and take that warrior one shape. And again, just kind of finding it with my feet first. And then coming up. I don't have as much room for flowy arms on this side. But as close as I can get. Coming up. And coming over. And then coming up. And this time, straightening out the front leg and folding over. And again, just kind of redirecting everything a little more forward. Bending the knee. Straightening it out. Bending the knee. Straightening it out. And one more time, bending the knee. And straightening it out. And then I'm going to take myself, as I bend the knee, into a standing split. So I kind of move just a little better. I'm going to bonk my forehead on this plant. So finding as best I can a standing splits balance. Oh. Now theoretically, I can balance on this one foot, but sometimes I got to catch. This one's a little precarious. Oh, last breath. And then bringing the leg in, putting it down, and coming up halfway. Oh, fold. And then we're going to come all the way to standing. Nice tall stretch. Find that mountain pose. Oh. And then again, nice big breath. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, fold. Stepping back to dog. Choosing to either add or leave out a little extra vinyasa portion, a little extra sun salutation portion. Oh. Right leg goes up. We're going to hook that over the back. Oh, sink into the left heel. And then step forward. And we're going to go for a warrior two. So again, I'm going to play with the legs while I'm down here low. So I want to feel for the movement and a kind of nice sensation in the hip. And then once I've got my legs really steady, then we're going to flow between a few poses. So, warrior two, inhale to reverse warrior. Exhale, shift. Inhale, side angle. Exhale, shift. Inhale, triangle. And then exhale, shift. Warrior two, big breath. Whew. Inhale, reverse. Inhale, side angle. Inhale, triangle. Inhale, warrior two. Let's do it one more time. Reverse. Side angle, triangle, warrior two. We're going to turn this into a wide angle forward bend. This is my favorite sequence this week. So we're going to turn the toes facing the, if you have a rectangular mat, facing the longer edge, but otherwise just facing in. So the navel and the toes are pointing the same direction, and then folding forward and deciding like how much forward bend is right. Noticing the sensation in the hamstrings. Stay a little higher up if it's a little bit more painful. Go a little further in if it feels nice. Now we're we're gonna do a little bit of a squat. So I'm heel toeing my feet in, and this is a higher, some people call this goddess or horse pose. So just a squat where the hips and the knees are about level with each other, closer to that than the hips below the knees. And then coming all the way up and stepping forward. And we'll find that mountain pose for a breath. And then inhale and reach the arms up and exhale. And fold forward and inhale and come up halfway. And exhale and fold, and then we're gonna step back into dog. And again, you can add the vinyasa or skip it. Holding and walking your dog. I mean, who doesn't like to take their dog for a walk? Left leg goes up. Hook it over the back. Oh, sink into that right heel. Little ankle swirl on that left side. And then we're gonna step it forward. Oh. And again, I'm going to try to find an alignment that feels good in my hips, right? And then once you've gotten your warrior two, we're going to add those flowier bits between these four poses. Warrior two, reverse, side angle, triangle, and warrior two. And just breathing in to each shape, transitioning on those exhales. One more sequence. All right, and then turn this whole thing around. So I'm in the wide angle forward bend going this direction. And again, you can add on. So what I'm gonna do is it's a little bit of a shoulder opener. And it also lets me pay attention to the arches of my feet. So I'm gonna fold forward, and then I'm gonna take my peace sign fingers on each hand, stick them in between my first and second toe, and wrap them under my big toe. Then I'm gonna take my thumb and put it right in between the two fingers, my two peace sign fingers. So now I've got like a little loop around my big toe. So I'm gonna push the toes down and then gently use that for traction to draw my elbows away from each other. Now you can keep your knees bent or have straighter legs or stay up a little higher. You just wanna feel it out so your hamstrings are also being taken care of. If you're in the tight hamstring crew. I'm trying to pull my elbows away from each other with the resistance of my big toe pushing down on my fingers. Oh. This feels like a really nice upper back, up, kind of chest area broadening for me. I appreciate it. 2 more breaths. I'm going to release with my toes, come up about halfway, and again, we're gonna turn this into a wide goddess squat. We're gonna add a little shoulder opener to this one. So I'm gonna take the right shoulder forward, left shoulder back, look over to my left. Oh, come back to the middle. Left shoulder forward, right shoulder back, look to the right. Oh. Back to the middle, and get pushing my knees kind of apart to create structure that I can sort of work with my shoulders. Coming back, left side. Oh. One more on each shoulder. Oh. And then, coming out of there, I'm gonna step back up to the top of the mat. Oh. Wherever the top may be today. Oh. And then come back to mountain pose, and we'll just notice and memorize it. Is it any different than it was a bit ago? All right, so we're gonna take a nice big breath. Oh, stretch up, exhale, fold forward. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, fold. So we're gonna step back to dog. We're gonna come into whatever version of a plank makes sense and lower onto the belly. Okay, and once here, we're going to spend a little bit of time with some cobra. So my hands are up pretty high, near the collarbones, a little above the collarbones with the fingertips. Inhale, lift into cobra. So lengthen through your legs, press them into the ground, press the palms down and pull the elbows back. Collarbones nice and wide. I'm just going to work the energy of lifting my spine. Come on back down. Same idea. Slide the hands back. Legs press down. Collarbones wide. Oh. And then one more time. Hands back a little bit further. Oh. Press the palms down. Press the legs down. Lift as high as you can with the ribs. And again, not pushing with the hands, but pulling back. And then coming on down, we're going to pause for a moment, do some windshield wipers. And then we're going to take the right leg, bend the knee, and we're going to come all the way over. We'll wind up sitting the other direction, facing the other way. So if you need to, you can just turn yourself around. Ooh. So my right knee is up, my left leg is straight. I'm going to turn to my right. So the first thing I'm going to do is sit up nice and tall. Now you can pull the foot in tighter if it still allows you to sit up tall. If I do it, it pushes me back. So I want to be able to get my pelvis neutral. And then rotate. And then this left leg I'm going to turn up, bend the knee slightly, and kind of dig in a little. So I've got a little bit of energy in that left leg, the length that I'm putting into my spine. And then I'm kind of holding onto this right leg and pushing it into my hand. So I've got a little bit more action for this outer hip as well. And then we're just going to breathe. Okay, one more. I'm going to come around and I'm going to take a few moments because it takes me a second for my spine to completely untwist. But in the meantime, I have dropped the right leg open. I've put the right foot right in between, just in against my inner leg. I like kind of down around the knee, calf area. If you want yours up higher, closer to your thigh, you can. For me, if I do that, it just makes this knee lift up off the ground. It's a little bit less comfortable in that knee. I like my knees to be comfortable. I feel like it's an important component. All right, so now it feels like my spine has mostly returned to neutral. There's not a lot of feeling of a twist happening. So now I'm gonna lean my pelvis forward. And your pelvis may go a lot forward or a little forward. You might get your pelvis so far forward that you can face plant on your shin. But in order for me to do that, I would have to really round my upper back and strain through the neck. And I don't think it's worth it. So a little bend in the knee to help kind of facilitate the hamstrings lengthening, lift through the quads. I'm holding on to my big toe because that makes for a nice handle. I can push on it and pull similarly to what I was doing in that wide angle forward bend. And it helps me get more length in my spine. So if it helps, cool, hold on to your foot. If it's not so helpful, don't. I'm going to take this whole thing and bring it up. Now, I'm going to pick this left foot up with my left hand, and my right leg is my stabilizing leg. So if I need to open it or wiggle it around, I will. So I'm reaching down here. I'm going to pick up this leg, and I'm bringing this. Now, the theory is I'm going to take this foot up to my ear like I'm talking on the telephone, like my foot is a telephone. It's not going to get that high. So all I'm going to do is just pull my knee back. And then I'm going to straighten this right leg back out, okay? And then lift and try to bring myself to a place where I'm kind of working with all of these angles. And then we're going to shoot that leg out. Oh. Give everything a little bit of a rinse. And then I'm diving back over. Oh. Now, we're not going to do a really aggressive cobra here because we just came out of forward bend. So what we are going to do is just like little baby cobras. Just lift the chest a little bit. Just lift the chest a little bit. Just inhale and come up. Anchor through the legs. Exhale, come on back down. Little baby cobras. One more set of 3. I just moved my hands each time to get a little change in the shoulders. Ooh. All right, so then we're gonna bend the left knee and we're gonna come around with the left leg. Oh. All right, so again, I'm gonna set myself up. Left knee is up high, right leg is out straight. I wanna make sure that wherever my foot is, it's not pushing me backwards. I can get my pelvis nice and neutral. So my spine has a nice twist. Once I come around in the twist, then I turn that right leg back on, bend the knee slightly, lift the kneecap, toes pointing straight up. And then with this guy, I'm giving myself some resistance. I'm holding my leg really firm and then pushing it into my hands. It's not going anywhere, but it gives me a nice kind of release in the piriformis and the kind of other external hip rotators. They're trying to externally rotate my thigh, and I'm not letting them. So it's a different way of getting to that area that we usually get to with pigeon. Speaking of which, we're going to come around to the pigeon in a little bit. One version of it anyway. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 more breaths here. And again, oh, my bicep is working hard to hold my hold my leg right where it is. Oh, as my leg tries to come on down to the floor. Okay, so now I'm readjusting, and again, I'm not going anywhere yet because my spine still feels like it's twisting. I don't want to try to fold forward with the fluid in my in my discs a little out of norm, right? Just in case. So again, adjust your foot where you like it. I'm gonna fold in. I'm trying to fold in with my pelvis, keep my spine nice and long. Maybe I grab my toe, but maybe I don't this time. Right? So you don't have to grab your toe, although it is useful. For me, this side's a little bit more challenging to get a hold of for whatever reason. There's just a little bit more resistance. Breathing, paying attention, see what's happening for your body. All right, so then we're going to come up and do the archer. So holding onto the big toe. Oh, we're going to bring the leg all the way up, straighten out the left leg. And again, I'm trying to lift up tall and draw this leg all the way back at the same time, right? So I'm trying not to let myself collapse back, bring in the torso up, while at the same time I'm trying to bring this foot up to my ear. That's as far as it's gonna go today. But it gives me this kind of sense of the, like the lunge or a pigeon or some kind of shapes like that in the hip. And then we're gonna shoot that arrow out. And here we are. So we're gonna roll down onto our back. Well, okay, this is what I'm thinking we're gonna do. We're gonna roll down onto our back, do a little pigeon upside down. But if you would rather do a different version of the pigeon, you can do that. I'm not gonna stop you. I'm gonna have a pillow handy for later, but for now, I'm just gonna lie down and then I'm gonna throw one leg up here. And that might be enough. Like maybe there's already sensation in your hip. Just putting that leg up on top. And then option number 2, keep the legs together and hold on to them closer to your chest. And then the last option is hold on to this leg. Now, keep the toes pointing straight up so that they line up with the knee. And then stretch that other leg all the way out. So we're kind of coming back to that sense that we had at the beginning with the hip flexor work. We're just stretching that leg out. And now holding this guy, almost like a happy baby, but a little more across the chest, a little less drawn towards the armpit. Just keep the shin bone even, toes and knees pointing the same direction, and that will help protect your knee. I also like to flex my foot because that holds really steady. So there's no chance I'm torquing my knee by holding here. And then the load transfers down to the hip instead of the knee. Oh, and then of course this whole delicious stretch that's happening as I lengthen out through my left leg. Now this is more effective for me if I elevate the hips a little bit, so you're certainly welcome to do that. Put your hips on a block or a pillow so that there's a little bit more of a drop. But for now, this feels pretty good. So 3 more breaths on this side. And then, oh, I'm going to return that leg and then this leg really gently. And give them a super relaxed windshield wiper thing. So then I'm going to do the other side. So I'm just starting with the most simple variation, feeling how that one goes, picking it up, feeling how that one goes, and then making a decision about whether I want to go for this guy. And this guy's on the right side for me is always enough. And then just breathing. And again, choosing your version. Now, and now I'm going to transition myself into my final relaxation. So little windshield wipers, that always just feels so nice to me. And also another thing that feels really good is to kind of pull the knees all the way in and kind of massage the back of the sacrum and up a little higher. So if that seems good to you, you can do it that way as well. And then sort of stretching each leg out. Oh. And I've got a pillow under my legs because that really helps my low back relax. Snuggle the shoulder blades under you a little bit so that your arms can let go. If you prefer to lay a different direction, like on your belly or on your side, you can certainly do that. You just want as little torque and pull as possible because this pose is designed so that we can make sure we shift completely over to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that when we're in that state, we're relaxed, our food digests better, we can sleep better, we can sleep in general, and the body repairs tissue better in that state. So if you're under, in times where there's a lot of uncertainty or stress or anxiety, this pose almost becomes more important because it gives us a few minutes to just pause and let the nervous system completely relax. move yet, but we're going to just take a moment to pay attention to the breath. And just notice how the inhale kind of comes down into the body and touches. Maybe you can feel it just through the navel, but maybe you can feel the breath in the legs or even all the way to the toes. Maybe you can feel the breath as it shifts the shoulders and on down through the arms as well. Even when we're being still, there's still a kind of rhythm happening in the body all the time. The rhythmic movement of the breath, and then also, of course, the rhythmic beating of our heart. And taking a nice deep inhale. Let go with a big sigh. And then wiggle your fingers and toes. And stretch them out. And move the wrist and ankles. And stretch it out. Curl up in a ball and give yourself a big hug and a back massage. Thank you very much for joining me on a Saturday morning for some yin-yang yoga. Take a nice big breath. Big deep sigh. Namaste, yogis.